So, Chris, what's it like to be a big Hollywood editor?
You're looking at it. This is exactly what it's like.
So,
I mean, the big is very relative.
well, honestly, we're in Fort Wayne, and so not a lot of experience with people in the industry, particularly people behind the scenes. And so, can you walk us through like what it is you do and how you do it? Is there a story or short way of talking about what a editor does on a TV show or on a movie like To Leslie?
Sure, absolutely. It's so what I do is, I mean, everything starts with the script, and everything is informed by the script. But they'll shoot the like a day's worth of material, and then I'll usually get it the next day onto Leslie. I think we were a little bit behind that because we shot on film, which is
Wow.
very unusual these days. Yeah, it was shot on two perf 35 millimeter, which is also very unusual. That's to maintain that sort of the cinema scope aspect ratio. Um, they were using like half, so if like a 35 millimeter frame is like this, they were using half of it, and so it was a very wide image, but you basically get twice as much material for your dollar.
Yeah.
And it was a very low budget movie, so it was and it was the director's vision to shoot it on film. So they would shoot it, they would transfer it to video or digital, and then I would get it. And then my process is I watch everything from start to finish, and I make my marks in the Avid is the Avid Media Composer is the editing application that we use to edit for the most part. And yeah, I would just like make markers and write down like, oh, that's a really great shot, or what a great performance, or I hope we can, maybe this would be a good use of this shot. And then watch everything, and then again, based on the script, I start just kind of assembling the scene and figuring out where's the best place to be depending on the material we have to tell the story. And also with every scene it's different with To Leslie, because with few exceptions we're pretty much in her head the whole time. But like on a show like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad, a lot of times within a scene you're sort of shifting perspectives as far as whose head we're in and whose story is being told. So sometimes that can add challenges, and you have to think, okay, I need to be in this person's head at that point. So how do I convey that? Which shot would be best for that, or which angle? So
Cool.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
It does. It does make sense.
Any of that
It makes sense to me.
Okay, cool.
Does anybody want to jump in and ask some questions?
Yeah, ask questions. So you can hear me, right? You can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So Andrea Riseborough's performance was incredible in that film. How do you know when to leave the camera on her, when to cut away? How do you what in the editing process like helps kind of amplify her performance? Do you just feel it out? Do you feel when to cut away, when to leave the camera linger on her?
That's a good question. What's your name, by the way?
Ryan Peasley.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Right on. So yeah, it's that. I mean, that's kind of always the question, really, is how, when to cut away. Sometimes in TV, you're sort of forced into a box of like cut. I've been lucky to work on shows for the most part that favor performance, and if you don't need to cut away, don't. If you look at like old movies or the old John Ford westerns and stuff, like they could just hang in a wide shot for forever because it was expertly composed and it was expertly performed. so you don't need to cut. So with Andrew, with this movie specifically, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like her performance is like, it's insane. Even like all the footage too, like all the dailies. And this movie was shot in 19 days, which is not a long time to shoot a whole movie. It was shot during the height of COVID. It was shot in December of 2020 in Los Angeles, where there was a surge happening in COVID. And so the COVID protocols were super intense. And so there was, even less time than normal in a day. Plus it was shot on film. That takes longer. So sometimes we only had so many options for some of the things, but with her, everything was great. I mean, everything she did was amazing. And it was sort of like, I don't know if you've done any acting or performing. I've done a very small amount. Art knows this a little bit, but like watching her perform, I realized like I don't know anything about acting. I don't know anything at all, because she's operating on such a different level. I mean, those scenes, I mean, she spends a good part of the movie drunk.
Right.
And she's not really drinking, but you like a lot of times you see people, oh, I'm stumbling around. Oh, I'm drunk. They're playing drunk. She just was. It was.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. And she's also not Texan.
Right.
She's a classically trained British actress, and only every now and again in the dailies she would stop. She'd be like, "Oh, sorry, sorry," because she got lost or whatever on the dialogue, and it's kind of a it messes with your head sometimes because the rest of her voice is so so accurate. But I'm trying to get to answer your question, which is
that's okay. I'm super
with her everything about the edit was about protecting her performance and shaping and crafting this performance, and then protecting it because the movie you're seeing, it's just under 2 hours. The original cut was I think was about almost 40 minutes longer, which is way too long.
Yeah.
And then, but we eventually got it down with Michael, the director. We got it down. I think we had a cut that was like 2 hours and 10 or 11 minutes, and we were really happy with it. And then feedback we were getting was kind of unanimous. It was just like, it's too long.
Too long.
So we got it down to 2 hours and 5 minutes, and we were very happy with that cut. And then we in the end we had to get it under 2 hours just for the producers, because the sort of the reality of an independent film is it has to eventually be sold to a distributor, and a movie that's under 2 hours, it's like exponentially easier to sell. So
for sure.
So that was the hardest pass of getting it under 2 hours. We had to make some sacrifices that were really, really difficult, but every single thing was about protecting her performance, because you couldn't just cut it quickly, because it would, it would just shorten these scenes and it would just ruin her performance, because you need to breathe with her. You need to like be in that room with her. And in order to do that, you just have to spend time with her. And we used to linger even more on her earlier in the movie, but we started paring it down because it was all about getting to that Willie Nelson song in the bar, where that like, beautiful shot. And by not lingering on her quite as much earlier in the film, we earned the sort of the patience of being on that moment and just like being in there with her.
I see.
So yeah, so but in general with that, with like how long do you stay? The I For me it's like music. It's sort of like you find sort of a rhythm and a musicality to a performance or and to shots, and it does become kind of a feeling rather than like back in the old days they used to they would measure film, and they would measure from like the like arm's length. It was like that's a close up, and then double arm's length is a medium shot. And so I don't really adhere to the sort of any kind of doctrine like that. So yeah,
Gotcha.
it's sort of about feel.
Cool. Speaking of musicality, did you choose the music for this as well?
I didn't. We had a music supervisor. Some of the
Okay.
songs were scripted.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the songs were played on set, but it was not a guarantee that we would be able to get any of the songs, which
Right.
was
Yeah.
scary. This is again a very low budget movie. It was financed by this amazing man who paid for the movie, and thank God. I mean, I just I love that this movie exists, but yeah, the music thing was really tough because our music supervisor, he sent us things, and it's a very lived in movie, and you got to
Mhm.
have these songs. They have to, when you're spending all that time in bars, you need it to be authentic. And
Right.
he was, so we had a lot of music in there before that I didn't know. I know who Conway Twitty is, but I don't know his work. And I
Right.
didn't know that I'd put like a $50,000 song, because music costs a lot of money to license, especially old music and or famous music. And we were very lucky in that we were able to get everything. We would replace certain cues, but the stuff that was like really important, like the Waylon Jennings songs,
Mhm.
Highwaymen, the Dolly Parton at the beginning, and all of these songs, they licensed them to this movie for a reduced rate, less than they normally do, because they really just loved the film.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
so it was a real blessing that we didn't have to replace, the like that Willie Nelson song. That's a demo. It's not even like a finished recording, so it's kind of like a
Really?
weird one to license. and
Huh.
and the Highwaymen is a super group that's Willie
Yeah.
Nelson and Chris Christopherson and Waylon and
Johnny Cash, right?
oh
Is Johnny Cash in
yeah,
it?
so like
Yeah.
that's like I believe that's right. Yeah. And so yeah, I again, we got really lucky that we were able to use almost all the music that we wanted. But
That's
I didn't
cool.
pick it. It was, I placed some things, but
Yeah,
some of it was scripted, some of it was stuff that the director wanted.
I gotcha. So aside from the songs that were like sung by people like Willie Nelson and stuff, that scene where she wakes up in the ice cream shop and it's morning, there's music added back there. It's almost like church choir kind of stuff. That's what really resonated with me, and that really made that scene hit really hard. Was that your choice too, or did the music supervisor choose that to go in there as well?
So I'm really glad to hear you say that, because there was, so that's original score that was
Sure.
done by
Okay.
Linda Perry, who is, she's, do you remember the band Four Non Blondes? They had that song "What's Going On." Remember that? So she was that. That's her, with the
Really?
hat, the big hat. She wears these big hats. Yeah,
That's
and she's
incredible.
in recent years, she's much more well known as a songwriter and producer. Like the artist Pink. Like
Yeah.
most of her hit songs, Linda Perry wrote.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, so she's like a big deal, but she's been trying to get more into score. And Michael, the director, his initial kind of conception of the film was to have no score, was to just have it only be diegetic music, just music that exists within the world,
Right.
and that's it. And because with score, it can be, especially a movie like this, it can be really heavy-handed, and it
Right.
can be, you can lean into telling the audience what to feel as opposed to just making them feel it.
Right.
And so we kind of only really used score in, I think there's 5 or 6 places, and that kind of haunting organ, it was
Yeah.
just, that was Linda. And I've never, Michael, we were just talking about this 2 days ago, about the process of scoring the film, because it was unlike anything I've ever experienced, because it all happened in the span of like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And
that's
we were in
wild.
Albuquerque because Michael had he was also, we met working Better Call Saul in season 5, and then um I hadn't started yet back on Better Call Saul for the final season, but he was directing and executive producing. And so I realized the only way we're gonna finish it is if I just move to Albuquerque for a couple of months. And he found a place where we could just like live and work, and it was crazy. And that like, that was the same with Linda. She was in LA. She would just send these ideas, and it just fit. It just felt right.
Yeah.
But so you say that, because I love that sound. There was some
Yeah.
debate with some of the producers, but I think in the end, because it's kind of unconventional. It's not like a stirring, strings or just a guitar. And then Linda also wrote that song that's at the end. Although she did not, there is a performance. The trailer has Linda's performance of it.
Okay.
But
Cool.
yeah. Did that
Awesome.
answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Since it was shot on film, I want to ask a question about shooting ratio, especially in a digital world where you probably have a lot more footage to go through, and maybe more. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's have more improvisation here. But in this particular film, did it feel different going back to editing film, where I'm guessing the shooting ratio was a little more restrictive, and maybe not as many options to play with in the edit? And which do you prefer?
I mean, it's much lower. And part of that is just the nature of film, in that you can't just roll the camera for 30-40 minutes at a time. Which, some directors like to do that. They never cut. They like to just, let's do it again. Let's reset. And you get a different kind of performance that way. Not always, depending on the actor, it's not always for the best, because a lot of times they get tired, they get confused. Sometimes you need that little breath and that little reset as an actor. So in that way, film can be a benefit depending on the type of actor. As an editor, it's like a different problem. I mean, everything is a challenge to solve with probably all aspects of filmmaking, but especially with editing, everything is some challenge to solve. And when you have less footage, you sometimes are forced to get more creative and find new ways to use the footage. And that's also why I watch everything. And I urge anybody who is like considering going into editing, watch all your footage. You'd be surprised that not every editor does. They have things called like script sync within Avid, that you can have the script and you just go like line by line and see every performance of a line. which is it's handy and it's fast, but you lose a lot of nuance because some of the best moments, especially in a movie like To Leslie, are not in the dialogue. It's in a look. It's in a you know, a sniffle, and that stuff, you have to just find that stuff. And but when you have like copious amounts of footage, it's a different problem. It's a different challenge. It's not always better. You know, they're just, it's just a sort of a different way of approaching every scene. If you have like a director like Vince Gilligan, he is very particular about his shots, and he doesn't like to reuse angles, so everything feels like a different angle, which is not normally how television is done. It is often how films are done, though, depending on the director. So with you know, I never felt like there was only a couple of instances where we were like bending the footage until it broke, and trying to make something work in a way that it wasn't intended to. But I don't think you'd ever know watching the movie what those things were. I know, because it's, you know, because I've seen the movie a million times, but I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, it sure does. Yeah, that was it.
Cool.
Chris, I'm going to call you out a little bit because you're not giving yourself enough credit. The beginning of this film, you do such nice work with time, making things chaotic. The scene in the bar where we're jumping and we don't know how long she's been in the bar, the scene in the bedroom that jumps us immediately to the clothing store, and you know, all this is going on at the beginning, and the movie slows down as she gets more stable. And I want you to talk through your relationship to time in this film, because you did an excellent job of putting together time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's nice of you to say that, and I appreciate you noticing that too. It was kind of it all for me. It was all informed by her mindset and kind of where she was at any given moment, and so that's a very accurate read. Everything is way more chaotic early on because she's more chaotic, and you know, as it becomes less so, it doesn't become quite so erratic. You don't necessarily it's not as jump cutty, it's not as, you know, unstable. But that was definitely, I mean, that was part of it, is the way that I edited it. But I mean, another part of that, it really, to give credit to Michael, the director. I mean, it was very much his conception in a lot of those things. That there was a version of that bar scene that, because I did multiple versions. There's a version that's way more linear. It's not quite as chaotic. And we both felt that you know, the moments warranted it, that kind of like chaos, because her life is just abject chaos at that point.
So I'm gonna put you in the Wayback Machine a little bit, because I've got a student in the back of the room who's not asking questions, but she should be, because you have an experience that I want you to talk a little bit about. And so you've edited in television, you've edited in film, but you've also edited in short film web series. And my student in the back has been talking about potentially trying to do web series down the line. And so can you talk about the storytelling formats and how they differ and how you edit for each?
Oh yeah, I mean, So what you're talking about is, so yeah, I had a company called Big Fantastic, and we made from about 2006 until 2011, pretty much. Yeah, 2006 to 2011, we were in operation, and the way that we did it is we were doing they started out as like 90-second episodes. But a lot of the principles of editing kind of apply no matter how long or short the episodes are. You know, and again, it would come back to the writing. We'd try to have a beginning, middle, and an end to every episode, no matter what the length was. And so, so as far as that goes, I think the same rules apply. It's just when you have less time to get the audience's attention, I think sometimes it's in your interest when you're cutting shorter form stuff to err on the side of being a little bit more bold and dynamic with your editing, of grabbing attention. Again, depending on the type of thing that you're doing. You know, there's so many different types now. I mean, when we were doing it, in, you know, going into your Wayback Machine, when we were doing our shows, there wasn't really, they weren't even called web series at the time. Like they were video podcasts, which seems that I feel I'm like the world's oldest man now. You know, oh, the video podcasts, but we limited ourselves to like kind of a format, at least in our first few series, of these 90-second episodes. The theory being, you can keep anybody's attention for 90 seconds, pretty much, if you're doing something compelling. The longer it gets, the harder it is to get people to sit there and stay there. But yeah, that was definitely our thought process. And we were making kind of like, they were kind of like soap operas for younger people, you know, like murder mystery, soapy, you know, sexy things, and which, I mean, it was like some of the best times of my life was making these things, and you know, because I'm also a director, and so I was writing and directing and producing and editing and shooting and, you know, doing kind of all of it, and, you know, going broke. we were just way too early, which is good because there wasn't as much competition, but it was too early to really make a sound business out of it. And on top of that, we were 4 filmmakers, and none of us were businessmen and or women. And I would say, if you're planning on starting a business, it would behoove you to have somebody who understands business to be a part of your business. So yeah. But does that answer? I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does.
I think the same basic principles apply.
Yeah, no, I think that one of the things that's really cool about your experience is the many different paths you've traveled, right? You know, I mean, the AMC work is fantastic and we all love it, right? The Emmy nominations are fantastic and the 2 Leslie stuff's good, but hey, I still enjoy a good episode of Prom Queen. And so, you know, it's
oh, thank you very much.
And so it's fun to get you to tap into all these kinds of crazy different things you've done. Does anybody else want to jump in with a question? Ryan wants to jump in again.
I had one I was thinking about. I do want to say that, you know, to touch on what Art was saying about the chaotic nature of the first half of the film, and then we get that song, that Willie Nelson song that really slows us down. I I want to say how accurate that is to somebody who's dealing with alcoholism, like Leslie was. Sometimes you lose days, sometimes it's night, and then snap, you wake up and it's morning. And then also to wake up not hungover, you can be in a rundown ice cream shop and it still feels really great. And so I just, I guess
At least you're inside, right?
right. Yeah. At least you're inside. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my question. So you worked with a lot of film and you said you had to cut a lot of things down. Was there a specific scene that like you really, really loved that you wish could have stayed in the film?
So there was it on the last pass, when we had to cut, I think a little more than 5 minutes out of the movie. There was an entire sequence where before sort of like meeting her where she is right now.
Mm-hmm.
She's a waitress at a, a little diner,
Okay.
and it felt, I that whole sequence, there's some really good stuff in there, and there's more stuff at the hotel, in her hotel or her motel room.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved getting, I mean, look, I'm biased, and I mean, maybe you feel this way after watching it, but I could spend like, as hard as it is sometimes, I could spend like 50 hours watching her just perform and go through life, because she's just so captivating and riveting.
Mm-hmm.
And but so and I liked being able to sort of ground myself in her, and in her current experience. But in the end, I don't think, only the people who've seen that know that. I don't think you really don't, in the end, you don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another one of the weird things about editing is, sometimes you don't know what you need until you're, until you see it all laid out.
Right.
So I have two questions I want to get in because I know you've got a hard out here in a couple of minutes, and I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out and wanting to work in editing and post-production? And then B, what are you working on next?
Sure. No, my first answer is, I mean, don't try, give up. It's not worth it. No, no, I would say, I would say just start doing things. Find people who want to make things. I mean, if what you want to do is edit, I mean, there's so many tools now. You can edit on your phone now, which is, I don't know how to do that, but I've seen it done. I've seen that it's possible. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just, the key to learning and getting better is like reps. It's just like doing as many things as you can, trying this, trying that. You learn every time you cut something, you learn more about how to do it. I also think the more people you work with, like find filmmakers who are they want to make a short film, or they want to make a whatever, and they say like, hey, let me edit that, and just try it. Just, I mean, especially if you're just starting out, just try anything you can. As far as getting into the business professionally, I know this is tough advice, but I would get whatever you can do to get yourself to one of the bigger cities for that kind of stuff, whether it's Los Angeles. Most of it is in Los Angeles, but there's a lot of it in New York as well. As far as like scripted and unscripted, but most television and films are edited in either Los Angeles or New York. And so I that's sort of the hard advice, because these are like expensive cities, and if you don't know anybody, it can be really intimidating. But and then it's about finding, like, starting in an editing room at an entry level job. I know that sucks, but I've done it. I did it for years. I was a a post production assistant, you know, getting the coffee and getting the lunches but being in the room and learning from people, and you know, you stick around and you show that you are a hard worker, and you show that you're willing to kind of go the extra mile and put in, you know, more effort. People keep you around and people respect that effort, and they're going to teach you things, because unless someone's it's so hard not to swear. I don't know if I'm not supposed to swear. I don't know. But
You're
if
fine,
someone's,
you're fine.
you know, if someone's not an asshole, they're more likely than not, they're going to want to help you, to mentor you, or to, you know, to sort of teach you things. And, you know, so that's important, is mentorship is actually is very important. It's been hugely important in my life as well. But yeah, those are the biggest pieces of advice I have for people who want to get into editing, which is that, you know, just find as many things as you can do and get better and better, and then work your way up. You know, once you start meeting the people and you're in these rooms, there are ways to get more experience as an assistant editor, and, you know, be editing on the side, or, you know, people start letting you edit this or that, and then, you know, you work your way up, and there's a lot of stuff that needs editing. I mean, there's like a, you know, it's an unprecedented deluge of material and content, a word I dislike greatly, but it's an accurate word. There's so many shows, there's so many things now, and you know, somebody has to edit all that stuff, and so there are a lot of jobs. As far as the job that I have right now, I am currently editing a new show for Paramount Plus, the streaming service. It's called Rabbit Hole. It's a new show, like a sort of like a, it's hard to describe. It's sort of like a paranoid conspiracy thriller, but it's also fun. It's from John Requa and Glenn Ficarra, who they're a filmmaking team. They directed Crazy Stupid Love. They directed that Tina Fey movie, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, the Will Smith, Margot Robbie movie Focus. They also directed the pilot of This Is Us. And so they have a very specific sensibility, and this is their show. Like, they created this show, they wrote and directed half of it, and it stars Kiefer Sutherland and Charles Dance, who most people know as Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones. So that's what I'm working on. I was working on it until just before I you know, signed on to the Zoom. We were working on the finale of it, and that'll come sometime early next year. I think it's coming.
Excellent. Any last
So if you have
questions?
Paramount Plus, look it up.
Well, I to watch your work, Chris, I now have Paramount Plus.
All right, how have you not aged? Like, what are you doing out there?
I was going to say,
This is crazy.
Weird. It
yeah?
looks good on you. It looks good on you.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Any last questions? All right. Well, we'll let you get to the hot date. Fine, if you're going to be that way about it. It's good seeing you, old friend.
It's great to see you.
We'll have to find some time to chat that isn't, you know, in a public space.
No, I'd love to, and I want to thank you very much for bringing To Leslie to Fort Wayne. You know, this is a really small movie, and it came out in a handful of theaters, but mostly it's been, you know, video on demand. But seeing it on a screen, seeing it in a theater with other people, I've now seen it a couple of times, and it's just anyway, I'm really grateful that you did that, and I'm super grateful to all of you for coming out and watching it on the screen. It's the best way to see it.
Well, it and you are on our screen all weekend long. So if
Oh,
you,
awesome.
yeah, if you feel like there's a presence at some point this weekend, it's probably because you're on the screen here in Fort Wayne doing this all over again.
Oh no.
All right. Well,
No, that's great. That's awesome.
Say hi to everybody out there and
Awesome.
It's a wonderful painting.
I will.
All right,
I will tell her that.
All right. I'll talk to you
Awesome.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.